Istanbul is boiling. For the fourth straight day, the streets of Turkey's largest city are flooded with angry demonstrators, calling for the resignation of President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan after the arrest of Istanbul's mayor. The protests, which began as scattered gatherings, have grown into a full-scale national crisis, with students, unions, and opposition groups now unified in a rare show of resistance. Dozens of emergency vehicles are stationed around City Hall, and riot police continue to clash with protesters well into the night. The message from the street is clear: Erdogan must go. What sparked the unrest? At the heart of the protests is the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, a popular opposition figure seen by many as Erdogan's most credible political rival. The government claims the arrest is tied to financial misconduct and abuse of office. Critics call it what it is: a politically motivated takedown. İmamoğlu's rise to power in 2019 shattered Erdogan's grip on Turkey's economic capital. His re-election sent shockwaves through the ruling AKP. And now, just as his national popularity surges, he's been thrown in jail. Coincidence? The people don't think so. The scene on the ground. Protests erupted almost immediately after news of the arrest broke. Now, on day 4, Istanbul is paralyzed. Thousands have packed city squares waving banners demanding justice. Students from major universities have gone on strike. Clashes with riot police have resulted in dozens of injuries and over 100 arrests. Dozens of ambulances and armored vehicles are positioned near key government buildings. Barricades have been set up around City Hall. Still, protesters aren't backing down. If anything, the crowds have grown larger and more defiant with each passing day. Tourists caught in the middle. While daytime remains relatively calm, tourists report seeing a heavy police presence across central Istanbul. Nightfall brings a different energy. Flares, tear gas, chanting, and sirens echo across the Bosphorus. Though no official travel restrictions have been issued, some flights have been delayed, and public transport is disrupted after dark. Hotels and hostels are urging guests to avoid protest hotspots. But many visitors are drawn in, capturing footage and sharing updates on social media, much of which is being taken down by Turkish authorities. Erdogan's response: defensive and defiant. Erdogan hasn't budged. In a nationally televised speech, he defended the arrest. No one is above the law. Political theater will not shield criminals from justice. But analysts say the move reeks of desperation. Erdogan's grip on power has been slipping, with Turkey's economy in freefall and his approval ratings in decline. Arresting his most visible rival only deepens the perception of authoritarian overreach, and it's fueling calls not just for İmamoğlu's release, but for Erdogan's entire regime to fall. The symbolism of Istanbul. This isn't just any city. Istanbul has always been the spiritual and economic heart of Turkey. Whoever controls Istanbul controls the narrative. İmamoğlu's arrest was a direct assault on that narrative. The backlash? It's not just about one mayor. It's about a nation waking up to decades of creeping authoritarianism. Protesters chant not only for justice, but for democracy, press freedom, and economic dignity. For many, this feels like Turkey's Arab Spring moment. International reaction. Silence and shock. So far, Western governments have offered little more than muted concern and vague statements about monitoring the situation. But human rights organizations are calling the arrest a blatant act of political repression. The EU and US face a difficult balance. Turkey is a NATO member, but Erdogan has grown increasingly cozy with Russia and China. A public condemnation could push him further into their orbit. Behind the scenes, diplomats are scrambling to assess whether this is the spark of a larger uprising or just another flicker of dissent soon to be crushed. What comes next? This isn't just a protest. It's a confrontation between two visions of Turkey. Erdogan's centralized, nationalist, authoritarian regime, a rising opposition demanding democracy, pluralism, and reform. The days ahead will be critical. If İmamoğlu remains behind bars, the unrest will likely intensify. If police escalate force, the movement could spread beyond Istanbul. If Erdogan doubles down, he risks igniting a full-scale national rebellion. The regime knows what's at stake. So do the people in the streets. Final thoughts. The beginning of the end? Istanbul has seen protests before, but this feels different. There's a sense of breaking point, a realization that the old rules no longer apply. That Erdogan, once hailed as a savior of the Turkish economy and modernizer, may now be remembered as a dictator clinging to power in a collapsing state. If he thought jailing İmamoğlu would end the threat to his rule, he miscalculated. It may have just begun it. And the streets of Istanbul aren't going quiet anytime soon. Subscribe for real-time coverage on global protests, political power shifts, and the movements shaping our future.